Well, hello everybody. How's the sound? Okay? Sounds good? Okay, very good. So, I said that today we would talk about the month of Tammuz, which is this month in Sefer Yetzirah. The truth is that it's almost the end of the month already, but I didn't get a chance to do it before, so I'll talk about it now. And then perhaps next week, next Wednesday, I'll talk about the month of Av, which is the coming month. Okay, so Sefer Yetzirah, as I've mentioned many times before, is a fundamental classic of Kabbalah. It is one of the most important Kabbalistic works, and it is purported to have been written by Abraham, or at least by being composed by Abraham, but it was written down much later on by Rabbi Akiva, about first or second century sage, the great Rabbi Akiva. Most of the Torah, certainly most of Kabbalah was handed down orally. It was not handed down in book form. It was handed down orally from teacher to student. And the reason for that is because in order to make something understood, you have to have a teacher-student relationship. To read it in a book, it's not alive, first of all, and secondly, it doesn't have the same strength, the same power, because oral transmission, which is the way the Torah was always transmitted, except of course the written Torah that was given on Mount Sinai, but the oral Torah that was always transmitted orally until there was a fear that it would be lost, so it was written, it was committed to writing. But writing is not the preferable mode of transmission. Teacher to student is the preferable mode. Okay. So the Sefer Yetzirah is one of these works of the oral Torah, the oral teachings, and it is a famous Kabbalistic work, very mystical and very difficult to understand. One of the features of Sefer Yetzirah is that it talks about things generally in three dimensions. These three dimensions are called Olam, Shana, and Nefesh. Let me just write that in the chat box. Olam, Shana, Nefesh, which in English will be translated as a space, time, and being, or soul. Literally soul, space, time, and being. So these are three dimensions in which we have to look at everything in creation. There's a space, in other words, the most physical aspect of it. There's its history and its future, and its present, of course. And then there's also its being, what it is, what it contributes, what it accomplishes, and so on. That's called being, or soul. And each of the months also has these qualities. Obviously, being that it's a month, it's a concept in time. But it's also a concept in space, and it's also a concept in being, in soul, and that's, of course, for us the most important part of this idea of the month. Of course, time is a critical thing, but the being of the month is the most important thing for us. It also is connected to space, as we will discuss shortly. So this is what the summary of the Sefer Yetzirah, according to the Arizal Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, the famous 1500s, 16th century Kabbalist from Tzfat, the father of modern Kabbalah. So he encapsulates all of the teachings of the Sefer Yetzirah in terms of the months, and this is what he says about this particular month, the month that we're in now, the month of, which is called, by the way, the month of Tammuz. T-A-M-U-Z, sometimes spelled with two M's, T-A-M-M-U-Z in English, or Tav-Vav Mem Zayin in Hebrew. So this is what he says. First of all, each month is connected with a letter. The letter of this particular month is the letter Chet. the letter Chet. Letter Chet in Hebrew, let me just write it quickly in Hebrew. That's the letter Chet, which I just typed in. It looks like sort of, I suppose you could say it has two sides and a roof. Two sides and a roof. Now in traditional Hebrew scribal arts, it's often depicted somewhat differently, but let that be enough for now. In English, it will be spelled like that, C-H-E-T, usually Chet. C-H in Hebrew, written in modern English anyway, C-H is always the sound. Sound that most Americans have a hard time pronouncing. All right, so, Chet. Okay, so does anyone know what the letter Chet, what is it reminiscent of? It's reminiscent of something. The sound of it is reminiscent of the word for sin. The word for sin is Chet, or Chet. Now, what does Chet really mean? There's a number of different words in Hebrew for sin. But the word Chet really means to miss the point, to miss the target. La'achti et hamatara, to miss the point. So Chet is, although each month is associated with a letter, it's very significant that this particular letter is also is the meaning of a word, the word sin in the sense of missing the target, aiming incorrectly, or at least shooting incorrectly and missing the target. Now, why is this so significant? Because, of course, the month of Tammuz, this particular month, is the month when many, many troubles began for the Jewish people, going all the way back to the time of the spies in the desert, or even before that, even before that. This was the day on which Moses came down the mountain after receiving the Torah, receiving the 2 tablets of stone. He came down the mountain on the 17th of Tammuz. That's the middle of the month. We just passed there. On the 17th of Tammuz, and that's why it's a fast day. And he saw the people worshiping the golden calf. Now that in itself needs to be explained, but we're not going to explain it now. It's a whole different ball game. But he saw them worshiping the golden calf, and he took the luchot. He grabbed the luchot, the tablets of stone that he was holding, which contained the 10 Commandments, and he smashed them. The reason for doing that was because if there was nothing in writing, then you could not. There was no sort of contract. Once he would have given it to the Jewish people as the contract, then they would have had to be punished for transgressing. And since the contract was no longer written because he broke it into pieces, therefore the punishment was not as severe. In any event, so one of the things that happened in this month was the breaking of the tablets. Worshiping with the golden calf and the breaking of the tablets. Another thing that happened was the day that the spies came back with their evil report about the land of Israel. Was sent by Moses into the land of Israel, and they came back with a negative report. Because really they wanted to stay in the desert, as I explained in the previous class. This was also the day on which the walls of the temple were breached in the Second Temple time, and according to many authorities, in the time of the First Temple as well, there were the Babylonians had laid siege to the city of Jerusalem, and they breached the outer wall on this day. And again, in the time of the Second Temple, exactly the same thing. The Romans breached the wall on the 17th day of Tammuz. Even if it may have not been the 17th day in the First Temple, in Scripture it has it on the 8th day, but the sages explain that they were so confused as to the times that they didn't realize it was actually not the 8th, it was the 17th of Tammuz. In any event, whatever it is, it's still a month of Tammuz. So this is the time when there seems to be a tremendous amount of troubles facing the Jewish people. Now, one of the interesting things that we haven't really discussed before in any of the other months is that each month also has, besides having a letter associated with it, it also has one of the tzirufim, one of the permutations of God's name as well. There are 12 permutations of the name Yud K Vav K. If I write it in the chat box, there you are. So the permutation of that name is in this particular month exactly the opposite of the normal permutation. It's reversed, backwards. It's a reverse permutation because this is a perverse month. It's a month of reversals. It's a month of things in the wrong order, in the wrong manner. I will discuss that a little bit more shortly, but just let me point out the other aspects of this particular month. Now, strangely enough, when we talk about the Sfirot, let me just share the screen. 1 second. There we go. Okay. When we're talking about the Sfirot, so besides the Sfirot themselves, the 10 Sfirot, when we count Keter, we don't count Da'at. When we count Da'at, we don't count Keter. So there are, after all, only 10 Sfirot. Let me make it a little smaller so that you can see it, the whole thing. Okay, can everyone see the whole thing now? What happened to the chat box? It disappeared. Here we go. No, you can't see it? Ew. Can anyone see it? Yeah, now you can see. Oh, good. Okay. So if you look over here, you'll see there's 11 Sfirot, but again, we only count Keter or Da'at, not both of them, for reasons I've explained before. Now, you would think that since this is such a severe month, a month of such sadness, a month of such tragedy, you would think that it is all negative. And in fact, it is called a month of judgment, a month of din, a month of harsh severities. This month and next month are very harsh months in the Jewish calendar. But you would think, therefore, that it would be all bad. But when we talk about in terms of the Sfirot, and even more so the channels between the Sfirot, the channel that represents the month of Tammuz, this particular month, is this channel over here between Chesed and Tiferet. The channel between Chesed and Tiferet, which is very, very strange. It's very, very strange. You would expect it to be on the side of Gvura, some aspect of Gvura, but it is in fact an aspect of Chesed, and that I will explain shortly. And the sense of the month, every month has a sense as well. The sense of this month, as I mentioned, there are 12 senses in Jewish thought, not just the Sefer Yetzirah talks about 12 senses, not just the 5 that we know of. But one of the sense for this month is one of the senses that we are familiar with, the sense of sight. So this month is the sense of sight. It has to do with the eyes. The tribe for this month, there were 12 tribes. The tribe of the month is the tribe of Reuben. And the constellation is Scorpio, or in Hebrew, Sartan. And in terms of the physical body, it corresponds to the right hand. The right hand, which you would think it should be the left hand, but it's actually the right hand, not the left hand. Now, all of this I'm going to explain. Okay. Any questions so far? So just to make things clear in the meanwhile. Any questions? All right. Okay, good. All right, so let's continue then. Now, let's just speak for a minute about the connection between the faculty, in other words, the faculty of sight, or the chush, the faculty of sight, and the tribe of Reuben. Now, all of the tribes are given their names because of some incident that occurred. When Reuben was born, then Leah, who was the mother of Reuben, said, Ra'ei b'ni, see my son. Ra'ei b'ni, if you, in a slightly different permutation, is Reuven. That's where his name comes from. His name means to see. So we see that Reuven and Re'iyah can sight, seeing, the faculty of sight, are definitely connected. They're clearly connected. Now, what is it about the faculty of sight that is important in this particular month? What does the faculty of sight do that none of the other faculties manages to do? One of the amazing things about the faculty of sight, and it's something that we can learn how to use, is that when you see scenery, when you see something, you see the whole picture all at once. With hearing, it's not like that at all. Hearing is sequential. You only hear one thing, and then you have to hear one word, and then the next word, and the next word, and the next word, etc., etc. You hear it sequentially. Whereas sight takes in the whole picture all at once. The entire picture is visible to you all at once. Now, why is that important? Because the way we really learn about things, and the way we really ought to learn about things, is by grasping the entire picture all at once. Now, it's true that when you see the entire picture all at once, you don't focus on everything. It would be impossible really to focus on everything, but that's only because we're using our minds in a very sequential way. We're using our minds in the way that the mind wasn't really intended to be used. The mind was really intended to be used as to take in the entire picture all at once and react to it as a whole. So the important idea of Re'iyah, of seeing things, therefore, is grasping things in their wholeness. In other words, grasping things not as separate identities or separate entities, but as a composite whole, how everything in the picture relates to everything else. Now, this is an extremely important thing, because our ability to relate to godliness, in fact, let's put it this way. The central prayer of Judaism begins with the word Shema, hear, O Israel. However, when God gives us the Torah, He says, Ra'ei natati lachem. See, I gave you. It is because of the various incidents that happened, the various ways of diminishing divine stature in the world, that we're sort of forced into a mode of hearing. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. But in order to be able to understand that one, hearing doesn't really get us there. What has to really get us there is visualization, visualizing things, visualizing oneness, seeing oneness in everything. So this is a very important lesson of the month of Tammuz. And again, it's related to the tribe of Reuben, who is called by the name of seeing. And it's related to the faculty of this month, the idea of sight. But sight gives us a whole picture. So one of the ideas of this month is therefore the rectification of the tragedies of this month, of the negativity of this month, of the sadness of the month. The rectification of it is to connect all things together into one picture, so to speak. To have an overarching vision of the entire picture and not just a small part of it. Now, of course, this demands a a lot of work. It doesn't just happen by itself. It demands a lot of work. Nevertheless, this is the ultimate goal. Later on, actually, in next month, there's a teaching from Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev is one of the disciples of the successor to the Baal Shem Tov. His name is the Maggid Mezrich. The Maggid Mezrich, the successor to the Baal Shem Tov, had many disciples. One of them was the famous Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, or the Berditchev Rebbe, as he's sometimes called. So he tells us that on the day of probably the saddest day in the year is the day of the destructions of the temple, the first temple, the second temple. On that day of destruction, which is the 9th of Av, for that's in next month, the second week in the coming month. So on that day, we are given a vision of the temple. And on the Sabbath before, for that reason, we read, it's called Shabbat Chazon, right? The Sabbath of visualization, of seeing the truth, of seeing a vision of the temple. We see a vision of the third temple. Now, we don't necessarily see it as an image in our heads, but we do see it in our souls. Our souls experience that idea. We experience the wholeness. Now, we have said that the month itself appears to be a very negative month, with a lot of negative things happening and a lot of tragic events, and indeed they did, and one shouldn't minimize that, though those are reality, they did happen. However, the Sefer Yetzirah points out that the tzinor, the channel for this month, the channel between the Sfirot, which we spoke about before, was the channel of Chesed, the channel from Chesed to Tiferet, as I explained before. The channel of Chesed to Tiferet. Right, that channel over here. Chesed from kindness to beauty, or from Chesed to Tiferet. That's on the side of the Sfirot, which is the side of kindness. And also, that this month in the body, in the human body, corresponds to the right hand. Why is that? Because really, the way to look at destruction, the way to look at the breaking down, the breaking of the tablets, the destruction of the temple, and so on and so forth, all those things, is to look at it not as an isolated incident, in which case it's overwhelmingly sad, but to look at it in the entire course of history, look at it in the sense of the bigger picture. In the bigger picture, really, the destructive aspect of this month is only for the sake of the constructive aspect that will be in the future. So the destruction is for the sake of the construction later on. The destruction of the first temple was so that there would be a second temple, which lasted longer in years. The first temple was only 410 years. The second temple, 420. It was bigger. The second temple was bigger in size than the first temple. And therefore, in terms of this world, in terms of time and space, it was a much grander structure. It was grander than the first temple. Although there were other things that were diminished in the second temple. But let's not get into that now. Both the first and second temple, in comparison with the third temple, will also be the same idea. They were destroyed in order to rebuild the third temple, and the third temple is called the temple that is forever. It will not ever be destroyed, and it'll last for right throughout time until the seventh millennium, when things return to a much higher spiritual state. But in any event, during the time of the third temple it's called a Beit Nitzchi, the eternal house. The third temple is the eternal house, because it'll be the temple in which the divine presence will be revealed to the entire world. So although Tammuz is a very negative month from one point of view, nevertheless, it's represented by the right hand. And it's also represented by the channel between Chesed and Tiferet, which tells us that which tells us that the most important thing over here is, in fact, the chesed aspect of things, the positive side of things that will come out in the future. Now, while we're experiencing trouble, while we're experiencing difficulty in our lives, or whatever it may happen to be, in our period of history, there's a lot of problematic areas that are going on now, and we can't ignore them, and we have to call them what they are. It's in the tragic times. But nevertheless, behind the tragedy, we have to know, behind the tragedy is another reality. It's the reality the way it's seen from the divine point of view. In order to create, there first has to be the destruction of the previous construction, the previous edifice, the previous idea, the previous generation is destroyed in order for the new one to be reconstructed. And we see this, in fact, also in the divine name. The divine name, as we said before, if you look in the chat box over here, the divine name, when it's written out, the ineffable name is written out that way. That's written with a yud, a hey, and a vav, and a hey. That's the way it should be written. But the permutation of this month is exactly the opposites. Goes yud, hey, vav, hey in the opposite direction. The verse that spells this out is actually a verse in the Megillah, in the Megillah of Esther, the book of Esther. It's the book of Esther 9. I'm sorry, not 9:3. It's the book of Esther 5:3. The book of Esther 5:3. Let's just see the message here. I'm not typing anything now. I'm not typing anything now. Wasn't no. So the book of Esther 5:13 rather. I'm sorry, not 5:3. 5:13. The book of Esther 5:13 says the following. Now I'll type something. Here is the verse. V'chol ze eneno shave li. Now you can't do anything about it it has to be in Hebrew because we're going to see the name over here. See, here's the hey, here's the letter hey, here's the letter vav. At the end of the word, the letter vav, the letter hey again, and the letter yud. Again, there's a message here. No one can see it. Yeah, you can see it. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. All right, now you can see it. Here we are. All right. Yeah, it helps to actually press the enter key, right? See? Anyway, okay. So here's the letter hey. Here's the letter vav. Here's the letter hey. And here's the letter yud. So you see, this is again from Esther, Esther 5:13. Okay, so what is this talking about? What's this verse talking about? This verse is talking about Haman, that with all the riches and all the honor and all the respect that was given to him as the second in command to the king Ahasuerus, he was the viceroy. He said, all of this is worthless to me. Kol zeh eneno shovel. It's all worthless to me. It's all meaningless to me. When Mordechai, that was Esther's uncle, who was the head of the Jewish court at the time and the leading saintly person in Babylon at that time, in Persia at that time rather. His name is Mordechai. Mordechai Yehudi is called Mordechai. So Mordechai refused to bow down to Haman. He was the only one that wouldn't bow down to Haman. And Haman, that was what irked him more than anything else. All his wealth, all the honor, all about prostrating themselves and bowing down. It's not worth anything to me, he says, because Mordechai won't bow down. Mordechai will not bow down to me. And that's the verse. All of this is not worth anything to me. Now, Haman, the sages ask about him, what's his connection? This is in the book of Esther, which is much later than the Torah itself. But everything that happened right throughout history, from the time of the giving of the Torah onwards, and even before that actually, is hinted to in the Torah. So the sages ask, where do we see a hint to Haman in the Torah? And they answer, the word Haman is from the word Hamin. Hamin ha'etz hazeh achaltem. Hamin ha'etz hazeh achaltem. Did you eat from this tree, the tree of knowledge of good and evil? The fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That word Hamin ha'etz, from this tree. That's where Haman has his root. He has his root in the sin of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now, I mentioned before that the sin of the tree of knowledge of good and evil would not have been a sin had Adam and Eve waited until the Sabbath. In other words, they had to wait for the worlds to be lifted up to a higher level, to the level of Sabbath. And then, had they eaten from the tree on Sabbath, everything would have been fine. That would have been okay, because it would no longer have been on the very lowly level that it was. It would have been raised up to the level of Sabbath. It wouldn't have been chulin. It wouldn't have been mundane and ordinary. So we see the same thing here with the whole concept of Tammuz. The concept of Tammuz is hinted to, the divine name is hinted to in these words. All of this is not worth anything to me, Haman said, to hint to us what our approach has to be in order to rectify the month. Our approach has to be unbending to evil, not compromising with evil, but on the contrary, being unbending as far as evil is concerned. We don't bow, we don't acknowledge, we don't give space to evil, even if it doesn't like it, even if it says nothing else matters to me, right? Other than that you befriend me, so to speak. We don't befriend evil, we stay away from it, we don't bow to it, we don't acknowledge that it has any hold over us at all. And that's what brings about the transformation of the divine name. It can get flipped around completely because of that. That's what flips the name around. Because Mordechai would not bow down, he would not bow down, he was able to flip the situation from one of total destruction, the time of Purim, when destruction was decreed by Haman on the Jewish people. He was able to flip it around, and the would-be destroyers were themselves destroyed. Now, the same idea is actually found in the concept of the chush, the sense of this month. Again, the sense of the month is sight. Now, in sight, there could be two things are going on. There's the seeing of the picture and there's the interpretation of the picture. Although we have to look at the picture realistically and honestly, nevertheless, there's going to be interpretation. If the interpretation is a negative interpretation, the impact on us will be a negative impact. If the interpretation is a positive interpretation, the impact on us will be a positive impact. So, amid the destruction, it is told about this, again, the great sage Rabbi Akiva. He was out with his friends walking, and they went past the place where the temple had been and was now destroyed. And they saw a fox running over the area of the Temple Mount where the temple had been standing. All of the sages began to weep, and Rabbi Akiva laughed. Why did he laugh? He laughed because they said to him, Akiva, how can you be laughing at a time like this? So he said, I am laughing because the prophecy about the destruction was fulfilled. Therefore, I know for absolutely sure that the prophecy about the rebuilding will also be fulfilled. If that prophecy was true, the other prophecy will also be true. In other words, how did he look? He looked at things from the point of view of where is the good in this situation? What good can I extract from the situation? How can I connect what I'm seeing now to God's promise? Or if you want to just put it this way, how can I connect what I'm seeing to God? That was the attitude, that was the focus of Rabbi Akiva. And therefore, he was able to laugh. Laughter is the sense of the month of Adar, the month of Purim, the month when we read the Megillah of Esther. He was able to see in the month of tears, which come from the eyes, he was able to see in the month of tears, he was able to see the laughter. He was able to sense the laughter. And therefore, he was able to mahapech, to transform and to turn around the permutation of the months into a positive permutation. So it will be, therefore, in the future, that the month of Tammuz and the month of Av will be months of rebuilding the third temple. And that's why we are shown a vision of the third temple on Shabbat Chazon. This is really what is called the tikkun of the eyes, the rectification of the eyes. The last words of the Torah are the words Asher asa Moshe le'enei b'nei Yisrael. Literally translated, which Moshe did in the eyes of the Jewish people. In other words, all of the great miracles that he did under their watchful eye, under the watchful eye of the Jewish people, so to speak. But the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, the Zohar, many Kabbalistic works interpret that last verse slightly differently. Asher asa Moshe le'enei b'nei Yisrael, what Moshe did, not in the eyes or in the view of the Jewish people, but what he did to the eyes of the Jewish people. That Moses' rectification was ultimately to rectify the way we look at things, the way we see things, to rectify the eyes. La'enei kol Yisrael is the words La'enei kol Yisrael. I'm going to type it in Hebrew and then in English. La'enei kol Yisrael. Yeah, okay, which means the in or to, as we're translating it now, the eyes of the Jewish people, right? La'enei kol Yisrael, to the eyes, to the eyes of the Jewish people. So the letters of this, these letters over here, that letter, the first letter of each of these three consecutive words is the word lechi, go towards. Right? So now, in other words, what Moses did was he taught us the rectification of the eyes is the rectification which teaches us to move towards and to look at our future. Look at how things can be in the future and then work towards that. That was the tikkun ha'enayim, the rectification of the eyes that he did. And that is what really the month of Tammuz is all about. It's rectifying the eyes. In other words, not necessarily getting a new prescription in your glasses, but learning how to look at things properly, to look at things honestly, to see them the way they are, but in order to rectify them, in order to improve them, in order to turn them around, in order to make it la'enei kol Yisrael, in the eyes of the Jewish people, all the miracles and the wondrous things that Moses did through the eyes of the Jewish people, teaching us how to look at things honestly and how to connect them to the bigger picture and how to connect them into the bigger picture in a way of unity. That's what it's all about, and that's what the month of Tammuz really comes to teach us.